Hi, this is Annie Grace, the author of This Naked Mind, Control Alcohol, Find Freedom, Discover Happiness, Change Your Life. I am here today answering readers' questions. And today I have a question from Emma. She says, Dear Annie, I've emailed you before, and you know that I've already read your book twice. I have you on Audible in my car. Thanks in great part to you and some others. I'm now on day 135 of my alcohol-free life, and the vast majority of my time, I'm absolutely loving it. My life is so immeasurably better, getting more so by the day. I cannot ever see myself drinking alcohol again. And I don't feel that I'm missing out. I feel like I've dodged a bullet and been let out of a prison. There's just one thing that bugs me, and I'd like to find closure on it so that it never comes back to bite me once the fading effect bias kicks in. I see no value in spirits or beer. To my mind, the only reason to drink them was for the buzz, and I'm so over that. However, I struggle with the idea that wine adds nothing to the whole foodie gastronomic experience. I love eating, cooking, eating out. I grow my own veg. I source local sourdough bread. I have 4 types of butter in the fridge, so you get the picture. For decades, I've taken it as gospel that some varieties of grape go better with certain foods, even while I was acknowledging that I was drinking too much of whatever it was. It's all around me. I have friends who run a Michelin-starred restaurant, friends who have planted a New Zealand vineyard, who run an independent wine shop in my town, whose family business is in the development of a stable of craft beers on the west coast of Scotland, other friends who run an Irish pub and a liquor store in Vancouver. I've eaten some great meals, invariably accompanied by either a sommelier recommended bottle or a flight of wines tailored to my tasting menu. Of course, if it was the latter, my recollection of the food would go a little hazy after the starter. I've drunk crap wines and I've drunk good wines, and I could absolutely tell the difference. And European humans have drunk wines for millennia. It's such a traditional thing that it must be normal, right? I'm in a place where even if I think wine can add something to taste-wise to food, I'm doing without it, and I feel it's a small price to pay for me personally, because if I were to drink again, it would be an act of brutal self-harm. So I'm okay, but I'm ruefully accepting my quest to find something non-alcoholic to drink that will complement the food, and I feel like my quest will be a long one. I've been out to restaurants, had friends around to dinner, had some great meals in the past 135 days that I've thoroughly enjoyed. In fact, now that I think of it, I actually enjoyed the food more because I noticed it more, savored it more, and wasn't oblivious to what was going on in my mouth. Yet I've still got this cognitive dissonance. Is it truly the emperor's new clothes on a global scale over a millennia? Help. I don't expect an easy or quick answer, but I would love to hear your take on this. So this has taken me a bit of time to respond to because I think it isn't an easy or quick answer. Obviously, we have drank wine as humans for millennia, and it is true that it's evolved in a certain way. So I'm not claiming to be a historian, but I did do some research on this, and there's a few different factors at play here. One of the things that I discovered, and again, I don't know how credible these sources are because they're based on history, but that often in ancient sort of Europe in the 1100s and earlier, it was safer to drink wine and fermented beverages than it was to drink the water because the water had so much bacteria in it. And further, the alcoholic beverages were at a much, much lower ratio of alcohol. The fermentation processes were not what they were today. And I actually even remember that in my drinking days, when I first started drinking, you could find wines for 9-10% alcohol. And then by the time I stopped drinking, you could find wines for 15-16% alcohol. I know that's true with craft beer too. Beer used to be 3.2, 4, 5%, and now you can find beers with 9-10% alcohol. So, as we know alcohol is addictive, people are increasing the level of alcohol in the beverage to sell more beverages. So over time, things have gotten much, much more alcoholic. And so it used to be that people were, from my research, and again, I can't say that this is verifiably true, but people were drinking fermented beverages as a safety measure with food. So that obviously makes sense that it became completely intertwined with this whole experience of eating since the very beginning of time. And of course, there is the benefit of, in the moment, alcohol gives you a sense of euphoria. It's an upper and a downer. So you have a 30-minute up and these nice feelings, sort of tipsy feelings, if you will, for 2 to 3 hours of the depressant aspect of alcohol kicking in when your blood alcohol is on going away, as it's fading, as the alcohol is leaving your blood. Then you start to feel uneasy and uncomfortable and tired, and all of these feelings. Your body releases adrenaline and cortisol as alcohol leaves your body, and these things don't feel great. So we reach for the next glass of wine to continue on the upswing, because when your blood alcohol is rising, you feel good. when it's going down, you don't feel as good. And you trade 1 hour of rising for 2 to 3 hours of falling, from my research. So I think that very quickly people say, oh, well, this feels nice too. And then it became completely intertwined. So I think there's a lot of history here to unpack. But equally, I don't think that no matter what is happening here, if alcohol enhances the taste of food or if it doesn't enhance the taste of food, the question becomes, why is it so emotional? Because there's got to be other things in life, and in your life in specific, that actually enhance the taste of food that you wouldn't be emotional about giving up. So you said you have 4 types of butter in the fridge, which is super cool. But if you had to give up butter, would you go, because all of a sudden you, in your words, butter was an act of reckless self-harm. Butter was doing something to your brain and body where it was causing you to make bad decisions, causing you to, have memories erased, causing you not to enjoy your food as much, causing you miserable hangovers in the morning. All of a sudden, butter was something that was destroying your life. And all of a sudden you had to give up butter. Now, butter is a pretty important staple. I know in my house, in my cooking, I use a lot of butter, but I would be able to make peace without lasting cognitive dissonance with giving up butter, because there's no addictive aspect. There's no tiny part of my brain that's saying, feed me, feed me, feed me butter, because there isn't that aspect of alcohol is addictive. It stimulates our pleasure centers on a far more artificial level than normal things, and that's the feeling we get addicted to. It's also the feeling that ends up stealing all our joy in the long run, because our brains try to maintain homeostasis. So I just want you to think of that. And maybe it's not butter, maybe it's ice cream, maybe it's something else, but you'd be able to find a substitute, and you might be bummed about it. You might not be happy about it, but you wouldn't have a lasting emotional dissonance about it for years. It wouldn't be something that you're out at a meal and you're kind of feeling like, oh, you just pretty much make peace with it. I mean, I had to give up eggs for about 4 years. I was massively allergic to them after the birth of my second son. And I ate eggs all the time. It was my favorite source of protein. I absolutely loved eggs, but I did not, once I eliminated from my diet, if I couldn't have something with eggs in it, it wasn't a massively emotional experience. So I guess that's something to consider. Like, where is this on the scale? Is this different a little bit than if you had to give up something else that you really think enhances the foodie experience? And then I think what you said about, you're not going to do it because of self-harm, that's really paramount. So even if it is that, it's completely for the taste and you're completely missing it, knowing that you're not going to do it, then okay, so that not everything might be in this pretty little package, but it's really important to sort of know why you're making your choices, why you're making your decisions. The 2 other things I want to say is, your very first taste of wine, before you acquired a taste, and acquiring a taste is by definition becoming more or less immune to the taste so that you actually enjoy it. Like, there's lots of stuff that my first taste of it, I didn't like it, but then eventually I did enjoy it. So like, I hated mushrooms at first, and then I learned to love mushrooms. But think back to that very first taste and decide, okay, was that like this pivotal, amazing thing or not? And then interestingly, there was a study done, and it was done over 6,000 wine drinkers, and it was done by the American Association of Wine Economists. They studied more than 6,000 wine drinkers, and they did completely blind taste tests. And wine drinkers were absolutely unable across the board to distinguish expensive wine from cheap wine. In fact, the majority ended up claiming to prefer the wines that were cheap and not as good compared to the wines that were good. So that's just something to consider. That, actually factually, while we think we can distinguish it, and I think we do that to ourselves, to feel good, most people couldn't actually do it in a blind taste test, which I found very, very fascinating. And then I would like to say one last thing, that, the thing that's harmful for you, the thing that's causing the problems, the thing that's causing the health issues, the thing that, like, as you say, is this radical form of self-harm, is really the alcohol. So the wine is grape juice, but then when it's fermented and it becomes alcohol, and the alcohol is the poison. So I guess there is a distinction there to understand that, there might possibly, we might be really good at some point. We can make decaf coffees now that taste almost just like coffee. And I know that there are lots of marketing dollars going into making non-alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic wines, to make them really, really good. And I think that we can get there because if there's enough of a demand, which there is starting to be such a massive demand for non-alcoholic drinks, because there's such a massive increase in the number of people who are sort of becoming more mindful of their health and realizing that the alcohol itself isn't what they love. And so it's the whole fermenting process, the whole, oaking and barreling process, but then they're taking out the alcohol, which is actually the fermented thing. And so at some point, I don't have a lot of experience with, I've actually not tried a non-alcoholic wine, but at some point, I would believe that we would be able to, if you keep looking, find a really good vintage of non-alcoholic wine. And so I would suggest trying that if this is something that's really, really sticking you. But anyway, I guess just to say, it's a great question. It was a tough one to answer because it's a good point. Like it's been around for millennia, and it is something with, the whole food experience. But I guess really ask yourself, did you love it in the beginning? And is it truly more or less of an emotional attachment than if you had to give up something else that you consider to be absolutely vital, like perhaps butter? Where is that emotional attachment? And then you can kind of uncover what's really going on. And then just and know that, statistically and research shows that we're not actually able to distinguish wine. So it may or may not be true, but it is a fascinating question. Thank you so much for asking it. And thank you everybody for tuning in.